This is The Reality Check, presented by the SAP News Network. Here's your host, John Lieberman.
Welcome to Reality Check. I'm John Lieberman. So good to have you all here. This is a show about bringing together top minds from all over the world to discuss the hot button issues of the day. I can't tell you how excited I am with the group we've assembled today to tackle this issue of climate change. Let's bring them in now. Dr. Celine Hawaya, she's the PwC Global Climate Change Leader, joining us from London. Good to see you, Doctor.
Hi, nice to see you.
Dr. Richard Munang, joining us from Nairobi, Kenya. He is the Africa Regional Climate Change Coordinator at the UN Environment Program. It's so great to see you, Doctor. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having me, John.
And our friend Mike Berry, Strategic Advisor and the Director at Mike Berry Co., a sustainable business consulting company. Mike, it's nice to see you.
And you, John, and thanks for reminding me that I never wrote my PhD up to be a doctor with the other two.
You are a doctor, right?
Could have been, should have been, but wasn't.
We often see headlines about climate change, and we often, see these warnings from groups like the Red Cross. Listen, the world should react with the same urgency to climate change as it is to the coronavirus crisis. Global warming poses an even greater threat than COVID. Celine, starting with you, your reaction.
Both are systemic shocks, right? And we knew a pandemic would be coming at some point. We absolutely know climate change is around the corner. It is absolutely fundamental. I mean, what we have to do to solve for climate change, unfortunately, is much more complex and just as urgent. We have to kind of halve global emissions in the next 10 years, which means radically transforming every sector of our global economy in the next 10 years, 2 business cycles. So yeah, very complex and very urgent.
Richard, your thoughts on the Red Cross comment?
Actually, the changing climate is no longer an abstract issue. It's moved a long-distance issue into the present. And in October 2020, the United in Science report unequivocally pointed to the fact that climate change has not stopped for COVID-19. And it then means if nothing is done, then definitely the world is going to move towards an apocalypse.
Mike, let me bring you in. Let me ask you this. We often see these warnings from groups like the Red Cross, but I don't know globally that we see the kind of outrage or push that something needs to be done now in quite the way that we do about other issues. Why don't we see it more?
Because it's always been about something that's going to happen in the future, 5, 10, 15 years from now. It's somebody else's problem. I think what we've seen in the last 12 months is this devastating impact of wild weather events around the world. From the Arctic, California, Brazil, wildfires, devastating hurricanes in the Atlantic, flooding across the southern US, across Europe, right away across the Indian subcontinent. I mean, here in the UK, we had the wettest ever February and the driest ever May in the space of 3 months. So suddenly this is becoming real to people.
We talk about technology and innovation in a lot of different realms of life. I'm not sure that we talk about it enough in the context of climate change. So how can technology and innovation push us forward here, Celine?
Today, it's something like 320 big global companies are committed to net zero. And just under half of total global assets under management, the investors there are committing to decarbonize their portfolios. So stuff is happening. But what happens when these companies commit to net zero? Well, probably the first kind of 5, 10 years of that decarbonization journey is possible with stuff that we have available at the moment, right? But actually, some of the more difficult, challenging things, if you're in the energy sector, right, a lot of the innovation has to happen in energy around moving to the 3Ds grid, so away from a centralized grid towards a decentralized, digitized, and decarbonized grid. And to do that, I mean, the good news is we're in the middle of the fastest period of innovation ever, the 4th industrial revolution. AI, machine learning, blockchain, quantum, advanced computing, cloud, advanced materials, biosynthetics, and this full suite of technologies is actually coming together to help solve some of these harder challenges.
Richard, I want to bring you back in. I have 2 questions for you. The first one being, what can we learn from what you've been able to spearhead in Africa? What can the rest of the world learn from what's being done in that part of the world?
The reality is this: if you look at climate change, the fact that it's been considered a distant issue have made people sometimes disenfranchised. I'm not really worried about what to do. But actually, climate change is a disguised opportunity. And when you look at what the young people are doing, they're very creative, they are very entrepreneurial, and at the same time, they're energetic. And what they have been missing is just guidance in a way that drives them towards leveraging climate action solutions. Climate change is a business opportunity for you to solve a community problem and at the same time put more money in your pockets. And they have been tapping into that. And as a result of that, one aspect that has been coming out very clear is that when people know that they are going to benefit from an action, they embrace it.
Fascinating. It's an issue of survival. I mean, it's fascinating. Celine and Mike, I want to bring you back in and kind of switch gears a little bit, back to this idea of sustainability and profitability. How do sustainability and profitability coexist?
10 years ago, the coal industry sat there smugly and looked at wind and solar and thought it'll never take off. It's expensive, it's intermittent. Now it's being destroyed. The same with the meat industry, complacent looking at plant-based and laboratory-grown alternatives. The same with the fast fashion industry, thinking it's still about buy it once, wear it once and throw it away. It's now about resale platforms. So every sector in the world is being systemically disrupted by sustainability in general, low carbon in particular. If you're not embracing it as part of your business model that you offer to your customers in the future, you're gone.
Celine, your reaction?
The simple point is that for a lot of companies, with the liabilities coming in from the change of legislation, you actually have a balance sheet impact on your balance sheet if you assume a carbon price of $100 per ton by the end of this decade. That's really going to hit home hard on higher emitting companies because of those regulatory changes. I think we haven't touched on governments too much, but governments have a critical role to play in structurally changing some of the incentives that are there right now to level the playing field with clean newer technologies that are coming in. So the role of governments will be absolutely key as well.
What else do we need to touch on? Richard?
If you look at what keeps people awake at night, generally across the continent today, is to put food on the table, is to send their kids to school. It's about economics, it's about socio-economic opportunities. And if any solution if solutions don't take that dimension, we might be in this for quite a very long haul in convincing people about taking climate action.
In your opinion, Mike, I'm going to give you the final word. How important is a global approach, and what Celine sort of mentioned, the idea that government, public sector needs to be more involved too?
We need both. So COP26 in Glasgow in a few months' time has to be a success. Global governments have to step forward collectively and say net zero is what we're going to drive across our entire economies. That's top down. I love what Richard said about the grassroots movement though. We need cities, we need communities empowered and unleashed to come up with the solutions that work specifically for them. Not just countries are different from each other, but regions within countries are different. And that takes me back to the final point. Celine was a brilliant advocate of this. Technology, the fourth industrial revolution, empowers the grassroots to make a change and gives people the tools that we need to develop a low carbon future.
Celine, Richard, Mike, what an amazing conversation on global climate change. Thank you all so much. And I want to have you all back a year from now to revisit many of these issues and hopefully to discuss a lot of the progress that has been made in these areas. But an absolutely terrific conversation. Thank you so much. And that is it for this episode of Reality Check. I'm John Lieberman. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.